Yeah.
It's time now for one more thing. We're going to skip Brian to the last one. You get to go first.
Oh, thanks. Anyway,
Payback.
you know what? Life is full of surprises, and yesterday I got a happy one. It was a very proud moment when I learned that my biography of former Supreme Court Justice Thurgood Marshall was named one of the 40 best biographies of all time by BookBub.com.
Wow.
So take a look at this classic C-SPAN interview I did 20 years ago, 1998, when the book came out.
Wow.
I had a real privilege, Brian. I got to interview Marshall for a 6-month period in 1989. This was at the end of his career, end of his life. It was a rich time, and one in which he was willing to talk. I felt, it's been a great gift for me. So the book has continued to steadily sell and was reissued for the 50th anniversary of Brown v. Board. So for me, just on a personal basis, let me just say thank you, and it's a thrill to be among America's greatest biographers. I can't believe it.
I'm glad I could help you with that book.
Books in the White House.
There you go.
That's a really impressive one. Really, congratulations.
Congratulations.
All right, I got one. Too bad Jesse isn't here because he would have been impressed with this one. All right, Mary Sedgwick. She's been legally blind since 2003, and she recently got the chance to see her guide dog for the first time thanks to a pair of high-tech glasses, and she shared the video of her very emotional moment. Watch this.
Lucy. They have those beautiful eyes, Lucy.
So those of us who are animal lovers, and I don't mean MS-13, but animal lovers, I would love that. She put in an online post that there are no words to describe how I felt when I saw the face of my beloved family and friends and the beautiful, soulful eyes of Lucy for the first time. She was a medical student. She had a dream of becoming a doctor. In her 4th year of school, that was when her blindness began. But she says now with these new glasses, she hopes to return to work in the medical field, and we wish her a lot of luck.
This is excellent.
Kimberly, you're next.
That's a very moving moment. Very happy for her. So I have a very cute one more thing, and it's about 7 Glenpool firefighters, and they welcome new babies all within 1 year. 7 of Oklahoma's bravest not only battle the blazes, but also change diapers and make bottles. And in less than a year, 7 out of the 20 from this Glenpool Fire Department in Glenpool, Oklahoma, as it turns out, became new dads. And so they decided to commemorate a special occasion with group photos that came from one of the firefighters' wives. So they waited for the last child to be born. So they go, oldest child is 15 months, youngest is just 4 weeks. Obviously, it was probably pretty difficult to get all those babies to be looking the same direction at the same time. So it's very cute. So congratulations to them, and God bless their family.
That's a great story.
So cute, right?
Gregory.
All right, now to some actual news. Greg's cable news. All right. As you know, CNN has been in a lot of ratings trouble. Well, God knows what's going to happen to them. So CNN has decided to bring back Crossfire for the 3rd time. And here's a clip. I got a preview.
Which one's Tucker?
Here we go.
Oh, that's right.
Here we go. I'm telling you, you put this on at 8 o'clock CNN, you're going to get huge ratings, so don't keep it at 5. Keep it at 8.
That's pretty funny.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh, Brian.
It's not going to work because they don't have Tucker Carlson.
Let's talk greatness. Let's talk soccer.
Oh,
First off, Cristiano Ronaldo, when he is the best player maybe in the world today, and laughed when they looked at his bust. They said, what are you doing? Are you mocking him? And I thought that was as low as can go.
Which one's the bust?
Out comes Brandi Chastain. Remember Brandi Chastain, one of the finest women's soccer players ever?
Yeah.
88 caps, 192 caps on the national team from 88 to 2004.
Don't know what that means.
Well, that means playing in the national playing in a national game. Well, she's so great, they put her into the Bay Area Sports Hall of Fame. That's a good news.
Oh my God!
But look at the picture and plastic.
No, that's not her.
That is her.
That's not her.
Sometimes it's better not to be great if that's how you're going to be depicted for all time.
No, Greg, like you could have drawn her better on the back of your folder.
People say that might be Babe Ruth on a bad day. Brandi Chastain's a beautiful woman. She demands better.
That's not very nice.
They should redo that.
It's so great not to be great because no one will ever do that.
Well, you don't have to worry about that, Brian. All right, set your DVRs. Never miss an episode of The 5. Special Report is up next. Hey, Bret.
We need busts of the 5. I think that's what we need.
That'd be great.
Thanks, Dan.
Try it.
President President Trump says a summit meeting with North Korea's leader may not actually happen next month and might not happen at all. House Republicans call for a second special prosecutor to investigate the investigators. A proposal for free health care for illegal immigrants that has critics in one state warning of disaster. This is Special Report. Good evening, I'm Bret Baier. We are coming to you tonight from the Richard Nixon Presidential Library in Yorba Linda, California. Part of a 2-week tour. More on that a bit later. First up, what could be a major step backward in the effort to eliminate the threat of North Korea's nuclear weapons program. President Trump says there's a good chance next month's planned summit with Kim Jong-un will not happen on schedule. The president indicating today the meeting will either be on his terms or it won't happen at all. And it could very well be delayed as a possibility. Chief White House correspondent John Roberts starts us off from the North Lawn tonight with where the summit's prospects are tonight. Good evening, John.
Brett, good evening. In the Oval Office today, President Trump told me the chances of a summit between him and North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is basically a coin flip. 50-50, the president said. But the White House is still making plans.
Mr. President, great honor.
President Trump has repeatedly stated that the summit with Kim Jong-un may happen, it may not happen. We'll see. In the Oval Office today with South Korean President Moon Jae-in, the president went further down the road to pessimism than he has thus far.
There's a very substantial chance that it won't work out, and that's okay. That doesn't mean it won't work out over a period of time. But it may not work out for June 12th.
The president's remarks flew in the face of the South Korean National Security Advisor, who said just hours earlier there was a 99% chance the meeting will happen. Later this afternoon, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the State Department is still working toward the June 12th date and that the U.S. is in deep discussions with North Korea over substance.
We're working to make sure that there's a common understanding about the contents of what will be discussed. But I'm optimistic. But again, this could be something that comes right to the end and it doesn't happen.
Today, North Korea invited journalists to its nuclear test site, which North Korea says is being decommissioned. But it's unclear whether the site was even usable after the last nuclear test reportedly collapsed tunnels. President Trump repeated today that Kim will receive protections in exchange for dismantling his nuclear program.
We will guarantee his safety. And we've talked about that from the beginning. He will be safe. He will be happy.
But President Trump expressed frustration that North Korea's recent squishiness about a summit seemed to coincide with a second meeting Kim had with Chinese President Xi Jinping on May 8th.
The second meeting, I think there was a little change in attitude from Kim Jong-un. So I don't like that. I don't like that.
President Trump also said he's not happy with how trade talks between the U.S. and China have been going, despite tweeting that China has agreed to buy massive amounts of additional farm agricultural products, would be one of the best things to happen to our farmers in many years. And the president insists he has not cut a deal to save Chinese telecom giant ZTE, though he does have some ideas of what it would take to keep ZTE in business.
What I envision is a very large fine of more than $1 billion, could be $1.3 billion. I envision a new management, a new board, and very, very strict security rules. And I also envision that they will have to buy a big percentage of their parts and equipment from American companies.
Treasury Secretary Steven Mnuchin was pummeled with questions about ZTE on Capitol Hill today. After conversations with President Trump, the Senate Minority Leader came away worried the president will go soft on ZTE to keep Xi Jinping happy.
We're pressing the president to stand firm, not to let ZTE wriggle out from under the tough sanctions we leveled on them.
And President Trump had some ideas today of how he sees the long game with North Korea. In the short term, the president envisions two Koreas, prosperous and living in peaceful coexistence. He did say he would ultimately like to see a reunified Korean peninsula, but only if the two countries wanted that to happen. No imposition of such an idea from the United States. Bret?
More on this with the panel. John Roberts live on the North Lawn. John, thanks. Putting the squeeze on Iran. The Trump administration is imposing new sanctions on a group of Iranians for supporting terrorism. It's part of the president's new Get Even Tougher approach to the Islamic Republic. Correspondent Rich Edson has the story tonight from the State Department. Good evening, Rich.
Good evening, Bret. And Secretary of State Mike Pompeo says he just wants Iran to act like a normal country. He has listed a dozen demands he's expecting from Iran. He says the United States refuses to compromise on those because he says they should be easy to meet.
The benchmark I set forward yesterday is a very low standard. It's the standard behavior we expect from countries all around the world. There aren't a special set of rules that we set forward yesterday for Iran. We simply asked them to behave the way normal, non-belligerent nations behave.
About 2 hours ago, Secretary Pompeo surprised reporters here, appearing in the press briefing room, answering questions about North Korea and Iran. Yesterday, the secretary announced the Trump administration's Iran policy following its withdrawal from the Iran nuclear agreement. Pompeo demanded Iran permanently halt any nuclear enrichment, release American prisoners, and stop funding militant groups. He says in exchange for Iran's compliance with the dozen demands, the United States would lift sanctions and help Iran modernize its economy. Instead, more sanctions against Iranian. This morning, the Treasury Department targeted 5 more, and Pompeo is warning companies in allied countries to avoid conducting business with Iran. In response to Pompeo's speech, Iranian President Hassan Rouhani asked, "Who are you to decide about Iran? Who are you to decide for the world?" Pompeo says the U.S. is deciding for itself and articulating what America intends to do. Now, in the next few months, the administration says it's going to allow sanctions to move forward against Iranians, the same types of sanctions that were prohibited when the U.S. participated in the Iran nuclear agreement. Pompeo says those measures will be the strongest in history. Bret.
Rich Edson live at the State Department. Rich, thank you. Venezuela is expelling the top U.S. diplomat in that country. President Nicolas Maduro is accusing the top U.S. officials there of conspiring against the government and trying to sabotage the country's recent presidential election. Tensions between the U.S. and Venezuela are increasing following Maduro's victory in the presidential election Sunday, a vote the White House has branded a sham. Yesterday, the Trump administration imposed new sanctions against the Maduro government. Republicans who have for months complained about the scope and duration of the special counsel investigation are now asking for a special prosecutor of their own. This comes as President Trump continues to insist the Justice Department look into reports of an informant inside his 2016 campaign. Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge is in Washington tonight with where things stand tonight. Good evening, Catherine.
Well, thank you, Brett. The president left no doubt today where he stands on reports the FBI used at least one informant to gather intelligence on his campaign.
If they had spies in my campaign, that would be a disgrace to this country. That would be one of the biggest insults that anyone's ever seen, and it would be very illegal.
With the South Korean president by his side, the president did not avoid questions about his demands for the Justice Department to act.
Some person got paid a lot of money. That's not a normal situation.
The suspected informant met with Trump campaign aides Carter Page and Sam Clovis, and at one point was recommended for an administration position. The individual was known to former Trump campaign chairman Paul Manafort from the 70s, but they were not in contact during the 2016 election. With the president's insistence on a parallel investigation and the Justice Department expanding an existing probe to cover the informant allegations, the ranking Democrat on the House Intelligence Committee accused the president of overstepping his authority.
This is information that the Justice Department, FBI, already expressed grave concerns about in terms of potentially risking people's lives.
What has been said is dynamite. It's a scandal of our time.
House Republicans introduced a resolution calling for a second special counsel to investigate a broad range of allegations against the Justice Department and the FBI spanning a 3-year period, to include the Clinton email case, alleged government surveillance abuse, as well as how and why the Russia investigation began into the Trump campaign.
This president has turned over 1.2 million documents to the special counsel Mueller. And yet our DOJ and FBI in a 7-month period has delivered less than 19,000 documents.
Democrats accuse Republicans of improperly investigating the investigators.
Normally, when you have Congress trying to interfere with an investigation, the president protects the independence of the Justice Department. But here the president is part of that interference.
If that's crazy, you got to take that up with the guys who wrote the Constitution, because that's exactly what we're supposed to do. So just give us the stuff. Give us the information that we're entitled to see.
The White House brokered meeting is fluid, with the latest information indicating it will be Thursday at the Justice Department, though a source close to the discussion said it's not clear the records requested by Congress, including those about an alleged FBI informant, will be made accessible. Bret.
Catherine Herridge in Washington. Catherine, thank you. More on this with the panel. A top House Republican says Russia's goal is to create chaos during the upcoming midterm elections. How to prevent that is a major talking point tonight, following a high-level briefing from some of the country's top intelligence officials. But correspondent Peter Ducey tells us from Capitol Hill, apparently many in Congress are not that interested.
In a room beneath the Capitol this morning, the intel chiefs who came to deliver a classified briefing about election interference that every House member was invited to shared those secrets with a lot of empty seats.
I would say we had a good 40 or so members that attended.
That's 40 or so out of 428 members serving right now. One theory: Congress didn't want to commute an hour early.
Well, it wasn't 8 o'clock.
Still, Homeland Security Committee Chairman Mike McCall was surprised that so many lawmakers who talk about election interference on the stump blew off the Director of National Intelligence, FBI Director, and DHS Secretary.
The Democrats have made this such a big issue and have asked for this briefing for a long time, and we finally schedule it, and it's classified, and, 30 members show up.
Every member of Congress that isn't retiring is up for re-election in the midterms, but none are known to be in the crosshairs of foreign meddlers.
Right now we have no intel that there's a particular race of interest.
Secretary Nielsen also explained that in addition to Russia, China and Iran are considered threats to election integrity, but that the kind of interference the intel community is worried about in 2018 is the same kind detected in 2016, where ballots aren't changed, but social media is manipulated to cause chaos.
I think we remain concerned, certainly on the foreign influence side. I mean, we've seen that continually.
Details like that did not dazzle the Democrats who did attend.
I didn't hear one bit of classified information. I mean, there was nothing that I couldn't have read in USA Today that was revealed. So the fact that there was a low attendance, it doesn't matter.
This was the rare Russia-related event on Capitol Hill that happened behind closed doors, so it's going to be very interesting to see if the hundreds of lawmakers who decided they didn't want the classified update today decide to show up to the next Russia hearing where the cameras are rolling the whole time. Bret?
Peter, moments ago, the House passed legislation to ease banking rules, essentially a reform of the Dodd-Frank law. What do we know about the bill that's actually now heading to the president's desk?
It's making life easier for smaller banks in this country. After the financial crisis with the Dodd-Frank regulations, the feds put the strictest regulations on banks that were worth $50 billion or more. They said those banks are too big to fail. They must be regulated. But now too big to fail is bigger. $250 billion, 5 times that size, is now the too big to fail threshold. That means that a lot of smaller banks are going to have a lot fewer regulations. This does not repeal Dodd-Frank, but it does roll back a lot of important regulations, and it is the rare measure that very easily cleared the Senate and the House. Bret.
Peter Ducey live on the Hill. Peter, thank you. Not a full dismantle of Dodd-Frank, but a big win for the administration tonight. Voters are going to the polls in Texas, Arkansas, Kentucky, and Georgia tonight. Correspondent Jonathan Seri is in Gainesville, Georgia right now, where there's an intense battle among Republicans vying for a spot on the gubernatorial ticket there. Good evening, Jonathan.
Good evening, Bret. Right now I'm at the Casey Cagle watch party. As Lieutenant Governor, Cagle enjoys statewide name recognition, but remember, he is just one of 5 GOP candidates in this primary, and so a July runoff appears increasingly likely in this race. The other statewide office holder in the Republican race for governor, Georgia Secretary of State Brian Kemp, he gained national attention with some provocative ads to show his support for the Second Amendment. Former Navy SEAL Clay Tippins and former Army Ranger Hunter Hill have been touting their elite military experience. And State Senator Michael Williams earned both praise and protest when he branded his campaign bus as a deportation bus. He says he did that to raise the issue of illegal immigration. For Republicans in this primary, the strategy has been energizing the populist conservative base. But in the Democratic primary for Georgia governor, two candidates with the same first name and similar platforms went into this race with some very different strategies. State Representative Stacey Evans, whose district is located in the Atlanta suburbs, is trying to win back suburban moderates and working class voters who have left the Democratic Party in large numbers. And former State Representative Stacey Abrams has been running a door-to-door campaign to attract new voters with left-leaning values. Yesterday, Abrams picked up the support of Hillary Clinton, who recorded a robocall for her. She also has the endorsement of Senators Kamala Harris, Cory Booker, and Bernie Sanders. Now, Bret, tonight Democrats are going to be watching tonight's primary to see which of those two strategies resonates most with voters, and then you'll likely see that strategy inform future campaigns going into the 2020 presidential election. But for Republicans, because of the sheer number of GOP contenders, this race may not be decided tonight, and analysts say the campaign for a runoff election for the GOP could be both nasty and very expensive. Bret?
Jonathan Serry live in Gainesville, Georgia tonight. Jonathan, thank you. Up next, residents who wanted to stay in their homes during the volcano eruptions in Hawaii are now fleeing for their lives. Many of them will show you. First, here's what some of our Fox affiliates around the country are covering tonight. Fox 45 in Baltimore, as authorities now have 3 additional teenagers in custody after the killing of a police officer. Amy Caprio, the teenagers are said to be suspects in area burglaries as well. Officials not saying whether they played any role in that officer's death. A 16-year-old suspect was arrested yesterday and charged as an adult with first-degree murder. Fox 12 in Portland, as a judge there says the Vancouver board responsible for igniting the Eagle Creek fire in the Columbia River Gorge last September must pay almost $37 million in restitution. The teen's attorney calls the amount absurd. The boy pleaded guilty to 12 counts in February, including reckless burning on public land and criminal mischief. He was sentenced to 5 years probation and 2,000 hours of community service with the Forest Service. And this is a live look at Las Vegas from our affiliate Fox 5. The big story there tonight, hundreds of unionized workers vote on a possible strike. The Culinary Union expects between 20,000 and 25,000 of its members to cast ballots. Bartenders, housekeepers, cocktail and food servers and other workers employed at 34 properties are eligible to vote. That's tonight's live look outside the Beltway from Special Report. We're outside the Beltway too at the Nixon Library, and we'll be right back. Solemn spot here at the Nixon Library, the resting place for President Nixon. There have been 2 new small explosive eruptions at the summit of Kilauea volcano on Hawaii's Big Island. Scientists there report near continuous low-level ash emissions and dangers from that and from the lava being behind a new push for evacuations there. Correspondent Jeff Paul is in Hawaii tonight.
I can't be any more frank. It's time to get out. It's probably past time to get out.
A dire warning for some residents on the eastern side of Hawaii's Big Island as lava flows are moving faster, crossing one major roadway and threatening others.
Hawaii County is doing everything they can to get last few holdouts in that particular area evacuated as quickly as possible because the situation could turn precarious really fast.
Well, not too long ago, you could drive down this highway, but you can see it is covered with lava that is still hot and pushing out flames. At this point, if you were on the other side of this pile of lava, you would need an airlift to get to safety. There are also growing concerns that lava could soon reach a nearby geothermal plant. It's already seeped onto the edge of the property, sparking fears of a possible explosion or release of toxic steam. While the plant is far from the summit, it's close to an active fissure in the rift zone. Crews have removed 50,000 gallons of flammable liquid and are in the process of quenching or filling wells with cold water.
It's not easy to predict where it's going to go and when it's going to get there.
blaze or lava haze is still a factor on the island. Lava is hitting the ocean, creating corrosive plumes that contain acid and tiny pieces of glass. Residents say what's scaring them most? Not knowing what's next.
This yo-yo effect of bad, and then the next day it's much better. So I think we're rolling with the punches, but you never know what's happening.
The Hawaii National Guard is now prepping its fleet of helicopters for rescue missions in the event people become stranded. Guard members are on standby as lava flows increase in speed and in size. Bret.
Jeff Paul live in Hawaii tonight. Jeff, thank you. The state of Alabama is challenging the federal government's practice of including undocumented residents in the census count. That's because the census is used to decide congressional reapportionment. Alabama says the 2020 census numbers will cause it to lose a congressional seat to a state with a larger population of illegal immigrants. One California lawmaker wants taxpayers to provide free health care to illegal immigrants. Critics say it will create a wave of undocumented workers from other states. Supporters say it's just the right thing to do. A fair and balanced look. Chief Correspondent Jonathan Hunt looks at both sides tonight from Los Angeles.
You know, you're getting welfare benefits. You have free health care coverage.
Battle lines are being drawn in the latest front of the ongoing immigration fight in California, as some state politicians push free health care coverage for undocumented immigrants. Others, including Orange County Supervisor Michelle Steele, consider the idea a disaster that will make California even more of a magnet for illegal immigration.
It's going to be utopia for illegal immigrants.
The Orange County Board of Supervisors is one of several local jurisdictions that have joined the Trump administration in suing California over its so-called sanctuary state policies. The proposal to expand Medicare was introduced by State Senator Ricardo Lara, who himself grew up without health care coverage as the son of undocumented immigrants. It would make California the first state in the nation to offer free health care to the undocumented. It would also be expensive, costing about $3 billion. But Senator Lara argues that in practice, the state is already paying for health care through ER visits, saying, quote, "We are trying to address the fact that whether you like it or not, our undocumented community needs the care, and we are paying for it anyway." If the bill makes it to Governor Jerry Brown's desk during this legislative session, he is required to sign or veto it by September 30th, just 5 weeks before the midterm elections, likely firing up the base on both sides of the political divide. Bret?
Jonathan, thank you. Up next, taking on gangs where they live. First, beyond our borders tonight, a top European banker says British households are about $1,200 poorer because of the vote to leave the European Union. The Bank of England governor says the British economy is 1.5% to 2% smaller in the 2 years since the Brexit vote than it could have otherwise been. Israel is denouncing a Palestinian request to the International Criminal Court, the ICC, for a probe into alleged Israeli crimes against Palestinians. Israel is urging the court to reject what it calls a cynical step. The Israeli Foreign Ministry accuses the Palestinians of incitement and exploiting civilians as human shields. Congo's health ministry says it has 6 new confirmed Ebola cases and 2 new suspected cases. Vaccinations entered a second day in an effort to contain the deadly virus there in a city of more than 1 million people. It says there are now 28 confirmed Ebola cases, 21 probable cases, and 2 new suspected cases. Just some of the other stories beyond our borders tonight. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Nixon Library here in Yorba Linda, California. Here in California, the state's attorney general is asking an appeals court to quickly block a judge's decision to toss a state law allowing the terminally ill to end their lives. A court ruled last week the law was unconstitutionally approved by the state legislature. Attorney General Javier Becerra argues the measure was legitimately passed and is urging the appeals court to keep the law in place while legal proceedings continue. On the markets today, a down day on Wall Street. The Dow lost 179. The S&P 500 dropped 9. The Nasdaq finished off 16. The father of a 17-year-old student accused of fatally shooting 10 people at a Houston area high school Friday says the teenager may have been bullied. The state's governor, meantime, is hosting a series of roundtable discussions on the causes of such tragedies and how to prevent them. Correspondent Casey Stiegel is in Santa Fe, Texas again tonight. Good evening, Casey.
Bret, good evening. Well, the investigation moves forward where we are here up in Austin at the Texas State Capitol. A lot of work is being done. Special roundtables on ending gun violence are being held. They started today, will continue through Thursday, convened by the state's Republican Governor Greg Abbott, who called this meeting of the minds an opportunity to develop swift solutions on how to make sure a shooting like this doesn't happen again at another Texas school. State lawmakers on both sides of the aisle, educators, parents, also supporters of the Second Amendment, have been handpicked by the governor to participate. Solutions ranging from metal detectors at public schools to improved mental health programs are among the long list of possibilities on the table.
Whether you are a Republican or a Democrat, whether you are pro-gun or believe in more gun regulations, the reality is that we all want guns out of the hands of those who would try to murder our children.
10 people were shot and killed on this campus last Friday morning after a student gunman walked into a first period art class and opened fire. 13 others were hurt. One person still remains in critical condition, and family members say he's very much touch and go depending on the day. That is Officer John Barnes, one of the 2 school resource police officers who helped engage and stop the gunman. Doctors say Barnes was shot in the arm while trying to do so, but the bullet did major damage to blood vessels, which caused him to lose a lot of blood. Classes are canceled here in the Santa Fe Independent School District through Wednesday of next week. Bret.
Tough. Casey Stiegel live in Santa Fe. Casey, thank you. President Trump will be on Long Island tomorrow to talk about gangs. The president has come under fire for referring to members of the notorious MS-13 gang as animals. And you may remember some in the media left out the MS-13 reference in the original coverage. Correspondent Brian Yennes tells us you will likely hear that description again.
Documented MS-13 gang. Over the last year, ICE raids targeting MS-13 gang members have increased. In 2017, ICE arrested 796 MS-13 gang members nationwide, the highest total seen in 9 years. It's all part of President Trump's initiative to defeat the Mara Salvatrucha, a brutally violent international gang from El Salvador. The FBI estimates MS-13 has 10,000 gang members in the U.S. Hotspots include Los Angeles to Virginia and Long Island, New York, where approximately 2,000 members live. On Wednesday, President Trump will host an MS-13 roundtable on Long Island to discuss progress made and what more needs to be done.
When the MS-13 comes in, when the other gang members come into our country, I refer to them as animals. And guess what? I always will.
But it's Trump's insistence on referring to MS-13 gang members as animals that has outraged critics who believe he was calling all immigrants animals. Republican Pete King of Long Island defends Trump.
First of all, the president is entirely on target. The only criticism I would make is that he's being unfair to animals. Animals don't kill their own, don't torture their own.
On Monday, the White House doubled down, releasing an MS-13 memo that included the word animals 10 times for effect. Suffolk County Sheriff Errol Tulin Jr. doesn't agree with the president's rhetoric, but he says the president's support is making a difference and they need more of it.
If I can get funding from my GREAT program, my gang resistance education and training, so that we can continue to go into the middle schools where we're thwarting gang recruitment.
Fighting MS-13 poses big risks. Police are on high alert after the gang called on its members to kill an officer because police are making too many arrests. Bret?
Brian Yennes in New York. Brian, thank you. New doubts about the North Korea summit and growing animosity with Iran and Venezuela. We'll talk about all of that with the panel when we come back.
the meeting is scheduled, as you know, on June 12th in Singapore. And whether or not it happens, you'll be knowing pretty soon. There's a chance that it'll work out. There's a chance, it's a very substantial chance that it won't work out. I don't want to waste a lot of time, and I'm sure he doesn't want to waste a lot of time. So there's a very substantial chance that it won't work out, and that's okay. You go into deals that have no chance, and it happens, and sometimes happens easily. You never really know.
We're still working towards June 12th. We will do what it takes to make sure that this is a successful meeting, whether that's meeting with the North Koreans in some third country or whatever it may take. We are prepared.
President Trump and his Secretary of State talking about the timing and the possibility that that June 12th summit in Singapore does move forward with North Korea. Seems less likely tonight than it did yesterday. Here are the actions North Koreans have taken since the announcement of that summit. They invited journalists to closing of a nuclear site, canceled South Korean talks over military drills with the U.S., threatened to cancel the U.S. talks June 12th over those drills, rejected unilateral denuclearization, and demanded South Korea return 12 defectors. Now, the South Korean National Security Advisor told the press there, quote, "We believe there is a 99.9% chance the North Korea-U.S. summit will be held as scheduled, but we're just preparing for many different possibilities." With that, let's bring in our panel. Byron York, chief political correspondent of the Washington Examiner, Charles Lane, opinion writer for the Washington Post, and Kimberly Strassel, a member of the editorial board at the Wall Street Journal. Kimberly, your thoughts on the prospects and what you heard today? Oh, I think we lost Kimberly.
I think
Chuck. Oh, you're still there. There you go. Kimberly. Chuck, go ahead.
Well, Bret, I was a little confused, I think, just by that, and also by what the president and the various other people were saying about this meeting. It seemed a week or so ago like this was a done deal, it was going to happen. And then you have the president saying there's a very substantial chance it won't happen, contradicted by the South Koreans, sort of contradicted by Mike Pompeo. It's hard to tell what he was talking about. He made an allusion to the fact that Xi Jinping of China had met with Kim Jong-un, and that since then North Korea seemed to have hardened its stance. So he seemed a little annoyed with Xi Jinping. But frankly, I'm not sure why, even if it were true that the meeting was in jeopardy, I'm not sure why he would sort of casually just drop it into conversation like that. It makes it seem like he doesn't even really know what's going on in his own foreign policy. But there's obviously something going on here.
We're trying to figure out what's going on with Kimberly's camera, but we'll come back to her. Byron, your thoughts on the announcement today and kind of this summit in the wings?
Well, it kind of seemed like the president was the executive producer of this. Tune in June 12th for the exciting conclusion. Will they meet? But I do think that nobody would have said going in that there would be this smooth path to this happening. I think everybody was offering caveats when the president first said this, announced this meeting, that you can't trust what the North Koreans say. They may be just playing the whole thing. It's all gamesmanship. So we should expect a bumpy road. I think it's going to happen, but I would expect a bumpy road and many more threats between now and June 12th.
Here's President Trump on helping North Korea, really kind of selling the prospects of a potential deal today.
I will guarantee his safety. Yes, we will guarantee his safety. And we've talked about that from the beginning. He will be safe. He will be happy. His country will be rich. His country will be hardworking and very prosperous. South Korea, China, and Japan, and I've spoken to all three. They will be willing to help, and I believe invest very, very large sums of money into helping to make North Korea great.
So what is Kim Jong-un thinking about? While we're trying to figure out Kimberly's camera, we know we have her audio. So Kimberly, let me ask you your thoughts on what the president said today and the thinking of Kim Jong-un.
Look, I think it's whenever you have one of the worst actors in the world, like North Korean dictator Kim Jong-un, come out and say that you fundamentally object to the very presence of John Bolton in the White House, it suggests that they know that they're up against some tough customers. And that's one of the important things out of this today. There were a lot of people who were worried that President Trump would let the whole argument about a Nobel Peace Prize go to his head, that he'd be willing to sit down under any circumstances and do any deal, and end up in the same situation of the Clinton administration and the George W. Bush administration, which cut deals that didn't last in the end. I think his willingness to say, we're going to do a deal, but only on my terms, and this summit will only happen under certain scenario, is a very good sign that those in the administration understand how Kim Jong-un operates, and the risk here of going into this summit without some groundwork having been laid.
Okay, we've laid the groundwork for your camera. We're back in business. Now, I want to, Byron, listen to this soundbite about the president talking about how China factors into this and what may have happened with a meeting between President Xi and Kim Jong-un.
President Xi is a world-class poker player. There was a different attitude by the North Korean folks when after that meeting. So I don't think it was a great meeting. Nobody knew about the meeting. And all of a sudden, it was reported that he was in China a second time. The first time everybody knew about. The second time it was like a surprise. And I think things changed after that meeting. So I can't say that I'm happy about it.
They didn't like it, Byron.
It's amazing how open the president is in talking about this. And well, I really didn't like that. That rubbed me the wrong way. It is part of this buildup that we were talking about, and this is a really kind of odd event when the president is saying that he can guarantee the safety of the other leader at the summit. That sounded kind of like a Godfather thing, like a summit of the families meeting. So, I mean, everything about this summit is rather odd, and I think in the soundbite you just played, the president is, as Kim was saying, kind of coming back to earth on this, not talking about the Nobel Prize, and talking about all the various roadblocks that exist before he can get there.
All right. Next up, Republicans want a second special counsel. President Trump wants some answers. We'll look into the investigation of the investigator.
If they had spies in my campaign, during my campaign for political purposes, that would be unprecedented in the history of our country. That would be one of the biggest insults that anyone's ever seen, and it would be very illegal. We want to make sure that there weren't. I hope there weren't, frankly.
President today talking about the investigation into the investigators and this informant, spy, whatever you want to call it, and the reports of it back in 2016. We're back with the panel. Kimberly, you've followed this very closely. Where is this all going, do you think?
Well, most recently, we had the president have a sit-down, obviously, with Deputy Attorney General Rod Rosenstein and FBI Director Christopher Wray and say, look, you need to cooperate with congressional investigators, get these documents out so we can say the truth about this informant or whether there were any more. Now, look, I think there's a lot of people, even in Congress, that are still skeptical that they're going to get to see the documents. So far, the Department of Justice has only wanted to brief them to keep tight hold over it. And that's going to be the proof of whether or not the president's message gets through, is are they allowed to review the material themselves rather than just go on the word of Department of Justice officials.
Here's some lawmakers weighing in on this whole back and forth, and you can imagine that where they stand politically is kind of where they stand on this effort.
Extraordinarily troubling if this White House is trying to force our law enforcement and intelligence communities to divulge classified information for partisan reasons.
If such a meeting occurs, and I don't believe it should, but if it occurs, it must be bipartisan.
It is scheduled to take place on Thursday of this week. The individuals that are expected to attend are Chairman Nunes, Chairman Gowdy, FBI Director Wray, DNI Director Coates, and DOJ official Ed O'Callaghan.
So the meeting this Thursday orchestrated, Chuck, by the White House Chief of Staff, but that's the group that's going to be there Thursday. Ideally, they think, to get the classified materials.
Yeah, and I have to say, I think Chuck Schumer has a point there. If this is about congressional access to these vital materials, why shouldn't it be bipartisan? The Democratic ranking member of that committee is cleared as well. I mean, especially if you don't want to create the impression that this is just, partisanship in the other direction, that there's a real principle at stake here. This is a very, very uncharted area. The idea of the independence of the intelligence and law enforcement communities is not written in the Constitution. It's kind of a norm that's been established since Watergate, really, fairly recently in our history, and it's being tested right now. We're going to find out whether it can withstand this sort of hyper-partisan atmosphere that we're in and the obvious fury of a president who comes from outside of that system and outside of that history at his belief that this machinery got turned against him. It's not entirely clear to me that it was being turned against him, at least not in an extremely, powerful or vicious way, the way he's describing it. It sounds like this Halper guy was sort of trying to keep tabs on Carter Page late in the summer.
Yeah.
That's not exactly embedding a spy in the campaign.
What I say about both sides of the investigation every time on the panel is we don't know what we don't know. Byron.
Well, the intelligence community and what Chuck was just talking about, they not only have to worry about the president's wrath or the partisan situation on Capitol Hill, they also have to worry about their own actions. This was an election in which the FBI had both major party candidates under investigation. Maybe they've been too involved in politics, and maybe this is what happens when you get too involved in politics. And as far as the meeting is concerned, we'll see what happens. I mean, Republicans have gotten very wary of these sort of things by unhappy experience in which they think that the Justice Department is going to turn something over, and then they show up in the room and the Justice Department just wants to talk about turning something over. But in the end, especially if they have the support, not just of the president, but especially House Speaker Paul Ryan, if they have that support, they're probably going to get what they're looking for.
Yeah, last word here, Kimberly. Wrap this up as we, follow each of these developments as they come.
Look, I think one problem with those who criticize this oversight by the House is that they begin from the premise that the investigators are beyond reproach or beyond being looked at. And given what is out there already about FISA abuses, the use of a dossier as part of that FISA warrant, who paid for it, the rival campaign, the texts that have gone back and forth between FBI agents, there's a lot of average Americans that don't trust those investigators, and that's what's driving this look into it. And the Department of Justice would do well to get it out there.
We'll have many more panels. Something tells me about this topic. Panel, thank you. When we come back, stocking the library shelves.